Hey there, Sagittarius. This is Seven Scorpion Tarot, and I want to welcome you to tonight's reading. So, tonight we are back on the hero's journey, and we are at your archetype, the mentor or the helper. And I know for Sagittarius, the archetype is often like the sage or the teacher, but I felt like that just fit so well for this stage of the hero's journey. So, we'll go back to the classic example of Star Wars. And so meeting the mentor, that would be the hello there. Well, I mean, that's from the prequels, from the younger Obi-Wan. But when they encounter the older Obi-Wan in the original trilogy, he pulls back his hood and, hello there. And that's when Luke encounters Obi-Wan for the first time. And there's so much involved in the mentor. And there's a lot of different mentor archetypes within that. And sometimes, and especially in Obi-Wan's case too, he had to become the hero momentarily um, before ultimately like meeting his demise to further Luke's journey. So it's interesting how that role can shift and be flexible and be adaptable, which is so Sagittarius, um, of being curious and open minded. And really, the archer is seeing the bigger picture of kind of looking at the battlefield rather than an opponent, like a singular opponent, like looking at that big macro view. And that, like, the mentor meeting their demise, that's typical for the storytelling, but it doesn't necessarily fit for real life. At least, like, not hopefully. It may very well, that you lose a teacher that was very important to you, something like that. But what I wanted to do here is actually talk about something really personal for me. And it's actually how the Morrigan came to be my patron. And I'm just going to give a blanket trigger warning for all the things I need to talk about, because this is actually the first time I'm talking about this stuff in context outside of a therapist's office. And the nutshell, like, introduction, which there's much more to get into, but how I met her was through a near-death experience a couple of years ago. I had a grand mal seizure when I was alone in my apartment, and I collapsed and stopped breathing. And I remember it. It took me 2 years to make sense of it. Is really, really difficult. It still is. I still feel a lot, many, many things. But so what I want to do in order to get through this, because this is really hard to talk about, and I think it's important not just for me, but for other people to see just somebody else like them, that you can keep getting back up no matter what life throws at you. Like, you can keep getting back up. Despite the world's best intentions on keeping you down for whatever godforsaken reason. But so this is going to be a major Arcana reading, and I'm going to keep my notes off to the side here, because normally what I would do is do like the story time at the beginning and then get into the reading. But I feel like if I don't have a distraction, I'm not going to be able to get through this story. So it's going to be a temperance card for the significator for the Sagittarius placement here. So this all started winter of like 2022 into 2023. And like these seizures were originally misdiagnosed as something else that I choose not to name just to not add stigma to people who actually live with that condition, because I don't feel like that's fair to them. Because my experience certainly wasn't fair to me. Um, I don't like to conflate things that are inaccurate. But so those seizures didn't get properly diagnosed until about a year ago. So back to winter 2022, 2023. And I had the worst flashback of my life. I don't remember what I was looking for, but I was going through some boxes um, under my bed and found a photo album. And this photo album, the first thing that hit my eyes when I opened it was a picture of the Pentagon on 9/11. And I hit the ground, screaming, puking. Uh, and it wasn't actually me who was there, it was a family member. And they made it out, they got out safely. Uh, but the problem was everything that came with that flashback. And because I was a young teenager when 9/11 happened. And that was the first time I remember the sensation of being pulled out of my body. That like dissociative time warp. Like the movies, some of them I've seen are actually not far off that like time stretch. It's a lot more foggy and like underwater for me than like how crisp it is, in 4K, whatever they're filming in now. Where's the Temperance card? Oh my goodness gracious. Is it the very last one? There we go. Sam Tarley. Uh, so yeah, it was, that was the first time I experienced that dissociative pull out of my body. Uh, and that was the introduction to the apex of dysfunction in my home. The parent who was there was doing their best to find solutions for their trauma at the bottom of a bottle. Turns out those solutions aren't there. Uh, Other parent was a drinker too, but more silently, kind of kept it more close to the chest. And I was caught in the middle. I'm an only child. I was isolated from extended family. No adults ever came to our home. It was the strangest thing. Like, we always went elsewhere. People didn't come to us. Uh, and this was also when I first started experiencing uh, violence from men. And I didn't have anybody to go to. So when I started exhibiting post traumatic symptoms, I was given antidepressants. Uh, Basically, my impression of things was that keeping me docile was a priority, was that we couldn't have the image affected, the image of the family affected, even though it was just like a war zone at home, an emotional war zone, which no, blows weren't being thrown, but like, if that's a distinction I have to make, that like, at least they didn't hit me, what a low bar. What a freaking low bar, man. Um, and it didn't just pull up the stuff that I had experienced when I was a teenager, it pulled up the things I experienced in my early 20s too. And so this all included, and this is all in that same flashback, in that same like opening of the photo album. Um, all the experiences I've had with being SA'd, with domestic violence, with a stalker, with all of these things, and it all hit me all at once, and it blew every circuit in my brain at the same time. Um, I'll start shuffling for the self here, and all I really remembered at the time was photo album, screaming, puking, and then I came to like on the floor in a different part of my apartment, and the floor was wet. So like seizures, you have an accident, like things happen. Why do I feel embarrassed about things that happen during a seizure? It's completely out of control, like grand mal seizure. And my behavior was so completely erratic after that, because I wasn't on the proper medication at the time yet. And so I was just having seizure after seizure after seizure after seizure, and nightmares, and just post traumatic symptoms, and then more seizures, and it was being mistook for something else. And the medication that I was being given lowers the seizure threshold. Um, and it wasn't until I want to say about 6 months after that had happened that my memory kind of started to clunk back together, because my psyche fell apart at the seams, just completely dissolved. Um, the feedback that I got from people around me was like, we weren't sure we were getting you back. It was really bad. And there were a lot of things that were private that were no longer private, which I didn't love, that I think people just didn't believe because I was experiencing mental health symptoms, that they didn't realize that these were post-traumatic things that had happened. Like I had a friend say, I don't know what he did to you, but you sound paranoid. Well, maybe listen to the first part of your sentence. That you haven't done any kind of information gathering to try and understand like what uh I had been through before you lobbed the word paranoid at me. And one of the reasons I would have sounded paranoid is because I was kept awake. I was deliberately kept awake by an ex, um, amongst other things. And there are some things that he did that, even though it had been a really, really long time, they were still in the statute of limitations. And I was hell bent on justice after all this stuff uh, came up, like burst through back into my conscious, away from the landmines and barbed wire and concrete that I had put over these memories, and they just popped all at the same time. Like it was like being plugged into the Matrix when that flashback happened. Like, and for whatever reason, like I felt like I got shot in the eye, and like I was also experiencing migraines, and that's actually part of the story too. Um, but I was experiencing these intense ocular migraines. And I think it was just the stress of the flashback that like intensified that pain like super suddenly. Uh, but so that would have been late 2022, and then early 2023, I was in deep conflict with one of my parents, and a big source of that conflict was like the goalpost being moved on in regards to like how I was working with my psychiatrist and the treatment plan and whatnot, and uh like that parent took issue with me disagreeing with this doctor, like, oh, you think you're smarter than the doctor and like all this and that. Like, no, I just think the doctor's wrong. Like, they're not infallible. And I think it's worth mentioning that parent I was having an issue with has a doctorate, not an MD, but a doctorate. Uh, so I think there's like a perceived like authority there. Like, you must obey people with this level of degree or whatever. Like, trying to make, I don't, how do I put this? Like, if I obey the MD, I'll obey the PhD. Something like that. Seven of Cups in reverse. So illusion, the illusion card. Uh, so there is illusion there. And interesting that it's reversed. Because I would normally read that as like blocked energy. Ooh, or maybe something coming clear. There we go. So a couple of things. This might be something coming up from the shadow into the conscious awareness, into the self. But what led to the estrangement was uh, me figuring out that I was being gaslit. And it was like 2 days later after that that I was like, I cannot come to your birthday dinner. Like, I can't do this. And I sent him a 6 paragraph message about, like, this is why, here's a list of reasons why we're not talking. I'll reach out when I'm ready. And I haven't reached out since. It was 2 years ago. And I'm sure that has been blamed on, oh, she's mentally ill and like blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, but also, and you're a dick. Like, me living with mental illness doesn't negate your actions towards me. Uh, but so this is like the removal of that illusion that I was able to identify that I was being gaslit by my own parent. And I bailed because that's a hard line. Like, as soon as that becomes clear, and I have no cares, none, if it's intentional, unintentional, whatever. I care that it's happening to me at all. That's the line. And I want to say just I was gonna say like a week before, but I'm not entirely sure. Uh, but shortly before, and I'm shuffling now for the personal shadow because I'm gonna do the full like 5 placement that I've been doing: the personal shadow, collective unconscious, ego, and persona. Anyway, uh, oh, lost the thought train. Hold please. So I was being gaslit, and that is the line. I cannot tolerate that. Oh, here we go. Knight of Cups in reverse. And this is actually a really good transition into the next um, part of this story. Uh, so while I was having all of these seizures and whatnot, about a week after I had estranged myself from that parent, and by extension, inadvertently, the rest of the family, like I didn't have this conversation with them that I don't want to talk to you guys anymore, but I also didn't hear from them after that. The only person I had a conversation with that I don't want to talk to you was that parent. So, whatever. Uh, be that way. But a week after I had estranged myself, a romance scammer hit me up. And I had never encountered one of these before. And I did end up getting swindled out of a recoverable amount of cash that I have since recovered, just like over time. Because I'll get into it at the end of the bit. But so this romance scammer was like masquerading as 3 people in total. Uh, and long story short, I'll be shuffling for the collective unconscious now. But long story short is we were talking about arranging a trip to see each other, to meet up, meet up in person. And it was scheduled out in the future. And it all sounded very reasonable on paper. 60-40 split, and they were paying the bigger half and whatnot. And it of course sounds super suspicious now, but at the time, whilst having a bunch of seizures, turns out that affects your judgment a bit. And I was in a particularly vulnerable position, just estranging myself from my family, and I was like, my nerves were super raw from all this post-traumatic stuff coming up from the depths all at once. And in a weird way, it was actually some of the best therapy I could have ever had. I needed someone to talk to, and they were ready and willing to listen because they were trying to get money out of me. And so they were telling me everything I wanted to hear, which is exactly what I needed at the time. Even though, I saw a clip of Keanu Reeves. He was like talking to some kids, and the kids were like, "Is this real? Like, are we in the real world, or is this the Matrix or whatnot?" And he's like, "Who cares if it's real? Like, it's real enough." And that's kind of how I feel about this situation. Like, it was real enough to get me through the long night. And because this was an incredibly difficult situation, because it gets worse. There's more. There's still 3 more placements. Uh, so this, romance scammer or whatnot, they hit me up, and I had made a partial initial payment for that trip for my part of what it was going to cost. And about a week after that, my soul kitty, he got diagnosed with kidney disease. And I had had him, since he was 8 weeks old. He was 15 at the time. And so I was devastated. And so I had started him on the prescription food for the kidney disease stuff. But he rapidly went downhill. He was 15, like that's an average age for how long they're gonna be around for a cat, for a house cat. And that's a good long life, He was spoiled. Spoiled. But so my priorities immediately shifted, when he got sick after I had made this partial payment. And man, it just keeps getting worse. It's such a bad time of my life. So I got him started on the prescription food, and he started going downhill. And then about 5 days after he had got diagnosed, which was literally like the day after my birthday, um, so about a week after my birthday, I go to the eye doctor because I had been having these ocular migraines, and I'd been dealing with them for months. And at first, I had gone to GP, and I saw a different GP than my normal one because she was like on vacation or whatever. And I was telling this doc, like, my history with migraines, and it was like, oh, I started having migraines when I was a teenager. And he's like, what did they put you on? It's like, nothing. And he's like, you've been having migraines since you were a teenager, and no one gave you medication. It's like, no. Because I felt like I was in trouble, like the way that his inflection changed. uh, and like he stopped talking and he started typing really fast, angrily, and I know what that means when I do that. It's nothing good. But he took me out in the hall, like this felt like back in the classroom, like get out in the hall, you're in trouble. Made me like walk back and forth down the hallway, like heel to toe, touch my nose to, or touch my hand to my nose, and then like pat my stomach and my head, like neurological tests and whatnot. And then back into the room, and he's like, here's a prescription for this, you need an MRI on your brain. I was like, what? What are you talking about? uh so cut to that week after my birthday, and I go to it's the level 2 eye doctor, ophthalmologist, the fancy one, because I had been to two optometrists, the ones that do like your prescription, and did their level of testing, what they were able to do with their like type of imaging that they have, which wasn't sufficient. We weren't able to determine anything. So I went to the next level of like the ophthalmologist that actually looks at the optic nerve and whatnot. So I go in, it's my first appointment with this guy, and um, all they dilate my eyes and whatnot, and I'm going in for migraine treatments, and they're doing all this fancy imaging with all these bright lights, and my eyeballs and dilated. I'm like, oh my god, are you guys just trying to give me a migraine so you see what happens? Like, because that kind of seems like what's going on. And he takes one look with a very bright light into my eyeballs and says, you need to go to the hospital and get an MRI on your brain and a lumbar puncture right now, to rule out a mass or an infection. And I was like, what? Like, I was just going to the eye doctor because I've been having migraines, and now I'm going to the hospital. My cat like just got diagnosed with kidney disease like 5 days ago, and like all this crazy stuff. But in the background, I had this reverse Knight of Cups, the romance scammer, to talk to. Somebody that, like, because they're trying to swindle me out of cash, they are being understanding and comforting and like this, that, and the other thing, because they're trying to take advantage of me. And even though it was dishonest in intention, it's what I needed at the time. And it was better than what I was getting from the people around me. Like, OMG. Can you believe it? Like that sentence. Uh, I was getting more support from someone actively trying to take advantage of me than the people in my life. Bummer. So I go to the hospital, uh, get the MRI, waiting, kind of indefinitely in the emergency room because there's, of course, a line for uh, the equipment and all that. And lumbar punctures are also not the most super fun thing in the whole world, especially when you're someone who can't really metabolize opioids. So, almost no pain relief during that. And, but the interesting thing was, after I got the lumbar puncture, even though it hurt like a mofo, the migraine relief was instant. So I got diagnosed basically with it's high brain pressure. It's something called idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Not common. Uh, it's like IIH is the acronym for it. And I've been dealing with these migraines for like 20 years. And I was getting blown off by my parents, by my doctors, by my teachers and whatnot, because I would like go in and say these unusual things like, I get a migraine every time it rains, every time the pressure changes, because my brain is filled with too much pressure. Like the, I think the lethal pressure for like brain is it's 40 cc's, and I was at 36 when I got this lumbar puncture. And that's what the eye doctor could see, like visibly just looking at my eyes. It was that pressure was pushing on my eyeballs from my brain. Um, Emperor and Nine of Coins in reverse in the collective unconscious. Hmm, how does this fit? Well, I mean the Emperor in reverse, it's certainly a false, the romance scammer, they're selling me an image and they're selling me this idea of independence because one of the buttons they were hitting on was like in the past, one of the things I've done to help myself feel safe is move. So that's what I was hell bent on doing at that time when I was having all these flashbacks and these memories like kicking up and whatnot. And they were saying they were going to buy me a house. Like they were going to help me secure that. So they were completely taking advantage of everything that was going on at the time. And like even though they were this like thread through the darkness, they knew what I was experiencing at this time and continued to try and like get cash out of me. Uh, and they never did after that initial payment. But they hung on for a while. This went on for like 3 months. And I'm going to start shuffling for the ego. So 5 days after I get diagnosed with this IIH, which moved one of my worst irrational fears into the rational fear bucket, which it could cost me my vision if not properly managed. The good news is, from that time up until now, I've gotten to the point where brain surgery is no longer on the table because of the changes I've made to my health. Um, and another like weird lesson in it, like had I not been treated so poorly by my doctors, this condition wouldn't have been exacerbated enough to be seen by the ophthalmologist. Don't love that. Don't love that that's how we had to get there. That needs to be improved. There needs to be a way for me to give them feedback where I'm actually heard. Like, I filed some grievances about this, and basically the response I got was like, sucks to be you. Like, it just, like, if you don't like it, you can go complain to the state health department about it. Like, so incredibly, I have never been so confronted with the fact that the American health system is a business and it's not about health because they're just trying to avoid liability. That's the only thing that matters to them at this point. Like, it is actually in that doctor's and that, like, where they work, um, it's in their best interest to double down and not admit their mistake, because then they're admitting fault for malpractice. So it's just ensuring that I will not get proper treatment from them, which is not fair to me. That's not okay. And seeing as I'm a woman and nothing I say matters, sarcasm, uh, I can't even get past the front desk of a lawyer, which is weird because I thought lawyers like to make money. I have as far as I'm concerned, and I understand I'm extremely biased, cut and dry, this was malpractice. I wasn't diagnosed properly. I was given the improper medication that is actively harmful to a situation like mine. They made me worse. I lost money because of it. My reputation got damaged. My career got damaged. Like, all of these things. And that doctor is still treating people. Like, has he admitted his mistake to himself? I'm not confident in that. I think he earnestly thinks he's correct, and he's not. I got better once I actively went against his, like, recommendations. And the absolute risk I took by doing that, like, that can't be overstated enough. Me betting on myself was the correct thing to do, and it's super, super risky. I got lucky. Um, Doctors have a responsibility and a moral obligation to be treating us properly. And I had to do the hard thing and go against them. Oop, here we go. Trust my intuition, and that was really hard, especially in this ego placement when I have the family structure, family system that I do, instilling, doubt and I'm incorrect and doctors are always right and this, and that. Um, I had to bet on myself and I had to give everybody the boot in order to do that. And it was the right choice. It was absolutely the right choice. But 5 days after I got diagnosed with IIH, and I'm still absorbing this, like, I could go blind, I might need brain surgery, like, all of this stuff. I had to make the mercy decision and let my kitty go, you know? And that was incredibly difficult. Uh, the one thing actually, I mean, there's really two things I'm grateful for in this scenario, but in terms of what I could give him in his final moments, he got to go in my arms. And what an honor to be able to give him that after all he gave me. Uh, Definitely getting emotional. He was one of the best teachers of boundaries I ever had. He was a black cat, so he was all sass. Um, and definitely my little spirit animal when I need to put my foot down, get the claws out, and like have you ever tried to get a cat to do something they don't want to do? Good luck. Best of luck to you. I hope you have band-aids. And that was so hard. Like, but the absolute privilege of being able to care for an animal from 8 weeks old to their passing at 15, Uh, man, that is, and now I adopt, don't shop anymore. So that is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I wouldn't replace it for anything. I don't want to try and recreate that with another kitty. Uh, I'm incredibly grateful that he was my first cat, that he was just so friendly, like almost had like a dog like personality. Like he would play fetch sometimes. Uh, he would come when called, and he was a little food motivated, like very discerning palate. Doritos and peach popsicles were the jam. Uh, and he was my little Velcro kitty. Like he was always attached at my hip. And I did get a visit from him once since his passing, and start shuffling for the persona. I'm of the thinking that the hypnagogic sleep state allows you to achieve a different, that different state of consciousness where the veil is thinnest. And I got a visit from him once. Uh, I was a wreck the rest of the day because that was really hard, but very, very grateful for that. Uh, so about another month went by, and this scammer, is still feeding me these lines about, they're gonna try and not try, but they're gonna get me a house, and then um, they had like tried to say they were gonna send me this large sum of cash just to hold on to for them, and I was like, no, nope, not doing that. Uh, but the thing that finally got through the seizures, this would have been 2 weeks into finally getting an anticonvulsant prescribed for something else. This is the thing that really grinds my gears about this situation. I'm on two anticonvulsants, and both of them were prescribed for other things, and then I was accidentally getting better. That's kind of like how this was figured out, sort of. I mean, up until about a year ago when emergency services had to break down my door because I was having a seizure. Super cool when doors are already a post traumatic trigger. Super awesome. This stuff was avoidable had I been diagnosed properly. Like, if I wasn't a pleb and I had money and I was a person who therefore mattered, I'd be able to get a lawyer to like get in this doctor's face and be like, dude, she already had PTSD. She already had it. You diagnosed her with it. Why are you like making her suffer more? Why are you doing this to her? This is cruel. Anyway, um, but the thing that got through the seizures, which there were more red flags, but let's be real, I was having a bunch of seizures, was they wanted me to invest in their crypto platform. And that, like, tipped me off, or tipped my brain off, rather. My brain finally, like, something got through to me and was like, hey, this person does not, like, no. Um, and then I looked into like the background of this crypto platform and saw all these like FEC investigations and things like that. So I started like asking them direct questions like what do you think of this FEC investigation? They'd be like real dodgy about it and be like, what? And then like never answer the question. And so I spent like 2-3 days like in denial, and actively in denial, like I knew I was in denial. So that might be some more high priestess here of as soon as I got that hit, I followed it. Um, and then, so after those 2, 3 days went by of me like just absorbing the disappointment of like after all of this stuff that I had been through, the neurological stuff, losing my kitty and whatnot, it wasn't real. That star I was hanging on to wasn't real. And me, uh, one of my nicknames, you can call me Petty LaBelle. I told them I got into a car accident and just stopped answering. Just stopped answering and filed a police report. And basically, the police report was like, they're likely international. I hope you have a better day, you know? And I think I already said I'm shuffling for the persona now. But so that was the end of that. And I've long since, um, like, just absorbed that money that I lost in just over time. Ace of Swords in reverse. So that's the Sword of Truth, but in reverse. I want to read the book for this one. Here we go. Ace of Swords. Maybe that's just coming to terms with uh, all the lies and all the deceit and whatnot. Here we go. Swords reversed. What you hoped for has not materialized yet. Frustrated by opposition, you may feel like giving up. Garner your willpower and trust your ideas and take them where they will be appreciated. If a decision goes against you, do not doubt your abilities. Keep the faith. And I did keep the faith. I bet on myself. And I never went back to my family or friends that I separated myself from. Um, I just, that one seems like it wants to come out. That was really quick. I walked away and I did not look back, and it was the right thing to do, because anybody whose bias gets in the way of my medical care to the point where I had a grand mal seizure and collapsed while I was alone, they don't belong in my life. I don't care what they have to say, quite frankly. Uh, and after all this is when I got this tattoo, the Assassin's Creed logo, because I was making a commitment to myself of the nothing is true, everything is permitted, we work in the dark to serve the light. And I went inward. I had a very long, long inward journey that I was already on, and then went deeper. And that's how I made sense of meeting the Morrigan during that grand mal seizure, because I didn't know who she was. And it took me a really long time to make sense of all those disjointed images. And I did not understand the phrase, the fear of God, until I met her. Like being confronted with her, like anybody who's familiar with her, I think understands the imagery that comes with her is not generally a source of comfort. And uh, the thing that was most stark to me about the void was the lack of temperature, was the just the absence of temperature. It wasn't warm, it wasn't cold, it was nothing. And just that sensation of 1,000 eyes being on me at the same time, and knowing without a shadow of a doubt, with no doubt in my heart, that I could be whispered away into nothing just gone, if that's what she had decided. But I remember the light, and the light was not leaving, it was coming back. It was being like rebooted back into my body. Uh, and that is a harrowing feeling, and that is not a sufficient description. Stork, 17. So I'm going to take that as the birth of something new, like my new life. And a big part of my new life is wrathful compassion. That's a concept that I got from Witch and Scythe, her awesome channel over there. I still need to look more into it, but it feels very in line with the Morrigan and like what I've been through, uh, and standing up and speaking out about these things. And it's a process, like kind of like what I was saying at the beginning of the video. Um, if I don't do it this way, I might not be able to get to the point where I can talk to people about it like IRL. And so this is a big step. Uh, I've gone from only talking about these things in a therapist office to talking about it on my channel, and the next step is opening up about it in my personal life when I feel I want to, when I feel that's necessary. And one of the biggest takeaways from this is that had I had access to that money uh, that I gave the scammer, I would have put my cat through painful, futile treatments. And because I didn't have that money accessible to me, I got to spend the last 10 days of his life with him. And even though it was hard, even though it broke my heart, him being away from me in a veterinary hospital would have been much worse for both of us. It was an inevitable end. And even though I want him to be with me forever, and he is, like, his urn is within view here, uh, he's not suffering anymore. And I gave him the best send off I could. You know, the absolute honor of being able to bury him into the underworld myself with him in my arms and let him go that way and let him leave this world that way. Priceless. Absolutely priceless. Pisces by Ginger. I think that's a really good song for this. Definitely has the like harsh and clean vocals, and I think she talks about the underworld too here in the lyrics. So lots to think about. I really appreciate if anybody stuck it out here through my vlog episode, and I'm sure I'll open up more about my experiences with the Morrigan and that just super intense feeling when she comes through meditation. And I love how she's bringing me back to my interest in my ancestry. And I got a used copy of How the Irish Saved the World, and right now it's being flattened between a couple other books because it's a little janky. But uh, if you're going through something really difficult like this, please seek help. If you're not getting the right treatment from your doctor, get a new one. Can't say enough for therapy and support groups. And if the people in your life are an obstruction to you getting well, go your own way. Fleetwood Mac it. Like, them being related to you or being in your life for a really long time is not an excuse to treat you poorly. It doesn't matter what they say, it doesn't matter what they believe. If their faith is different than yours, if their culture is different than yours, your wellness and your health is the top priority. And I hope if there is something that you're holding in that you don't feel like you can talk about, I hope this changes your mind and helps you see that you can still use your voice no matter how hard things get. So, overall, I hope this helps. I hope this resonates. And if it doesn't, I hope the next one does. Thank you so much.